Before I begin my sermon this morning, we had a beautiful, beautiful celebration last Sunday of our nation's birth in our independence on July 4th. And it was just a beautiful, beautiful liturgy, beautiful music, and we were all very enthusiastic. And today is July 14th. And today is Bastille Day in France. And I would be terribly amiss if I didn't recognize that day. Yes, my French connections would be very angry with me. But I wanted to share with you, and I wrote this days ago. There's a very great quote from Charles de Gaulle. You know, when he was in England at a seminar, at a meeting, when France was overcome by the Nazis. And he was the only democratically elected leader of Free France at that time. And the only reason why he survived is because he was in England at the time with that meeting. So he is very important to the French people. And he was asked, what is the difference? What is the difference between a patriot and a nationalist? And de Gaulle answered, a patriot is someone who loves his country. A nationalist hates everybody else. So the message here for this election year is that may we all be patriots of this great nation as we go forward. Now on to the sermon. Okay. What a gory story, really, in our morning's gospel. And all of this beheading and this carrying it on a platter, etc., happens during a banquet, during a birthday party. Can you imagine having celebrated and eaten and all of that, and then having the servants carry in this platter with the head of John the Baptist? Not exactly appetizing. And on top of that, to die at the hands of a woman was considered a mark of shame in those ancient times. Remember when I spoke about Deborah being mother of Israel, and Barak wouldn't go into battle until she went with him? Because for the enemy to be defeated by the army being led with Deborah in front with Barak was a big, shameful event for them. But let us place today's gospel into the context of Mark's overall gospel writing. Before today's reading, Jesus sends out his disciples to spread the good news. He sends them out in twos. And he tells them, don't take anything for your journey except a staff, no money, no bread. So think about how much different it is when we do our journeys. Do I have enough room in my suitcase to take everything that I want to take with me? Do I have enough spending money or foreign currency with me when I go somewhere? Do I have a list of all the places I want to go and see and the restaurants I want to eat in and all of that? You know, we get so tied up in these things. But Jesus and his disciples were not concerned about their tangible traveling attire and accoutrements. Jesus gave them a mission: spread the good news. And so they did. And Mark tells us that they cast out many devils, and they anointed many sick people with oil, and healed them. So now we come to today's verses. King Herod heard about this. He heard about Jesus and his disciples. And this was before the days of instant messaging, before email and Facebook, even before cell phones. There was a time before cell phones. And Mark purposely places the death of John the Baptist at this point in his writing. But why there? Well, Mark hinted at this in chapter 1, when John was first arrested. Today's account is an example of Mark's sandwich writing technique. Mark sandwiched things. He had a story, another story, and then a finishing story. So he placed the full details of John's death between sending out those disciples to spread the word, and probably next week we will be reading about the feeding of the 5,000. Those are two really good stories, aren't they? And between them, we have that thorn of a story, if you will, about John the Baptist. Mark here is trying to connect the death of John with the mission of Jesus. You see, John's message met with political obstacles, just as Jesus and his followers do. John also declared the unlawful marriage of Herodias to King Herod, which certainly did not win him any political points. Today's opening verses show how folks were thinking about this special man named Jesus. Was he a prophet? Was Elijah returning? And these were some then popular remarks about Jesus. And then Herod has a flashback to that death of John. Was Jesus John returning from the dead to haunt him for what he had allowed to happen? Now, just an aside, the beheading of John happens in just two of our Gospels, Matthew and Mark. There is a difference found between them. In Matthew's account, Herod is said to have feared the people because of John's popularity, and they considered John a great prophet. Here in Mark, we have heard Herod fearing John because he knew that John was a righteous and holy man. Herod tried to protect John because of this, until that fateful birthday party and his vocal promise to Herodias' daughter in front of so many people. In Matthew's account, Herod really backed himself into a corner. Contrasting those two accounts shows Mark's Herod was more sympathetic toward John. However, in Jewish tradition, giving an oath, like Herod did to Herodias and her daughter, was not easily dismissed and created an almost tangible tension right in that room after the dance. Herod had backed himself into a corner. Looking at the woman involved in the scene, we see that Herodias certainly carried a grudge against John because of his comments about her marriage to Herod. She took out her satisfaction and revenge through her daughter's entertainment value. Herodias takes full blame for John's death in Mark's gospel. Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. And gentlemen, listen to this. The female of the species is much deadlier than the male. Just a word of advice. One important point, however, to be emphasized here is that John, who was a faithful disciple of Christ and performed his destiny through proclaiming the good news, suffered terribly for doing what he was empowered to do. Jesus, sending out his disciples 2 by 2, placed them in that same danger. Jesus' teachings, you've got to remember, Jesus' teachings challenged the civil as well as the religious powers at that time. And that was dangerous. And that same danger falls on the heads of his followers. And that can even happen today to those who proclaim Christ and work to spread the good news. So, Should that deter us from our mission? Heck no. With God's grace, we can do all things. We have God's promise on that. And all God's people said,
Amen.